front of the beamer, so then... wait a second. Because otherwise I cannot show. Okay, here. What's the name?
Secure.
No?
Yeah, yes, the bad haal. Not the app, the haal. No. Kijk, foundation. This one.
Okay,
And then secure.
Okay, let me see.
S. Capital.
It's capital. R-E?
Secure and then 66.
No.
And without a capital? This is for sure this one, because that's what I have.
Yeah, no, but now I need to forget this. Let me see.
Ja, van beschermjasje.
Ja.
Ja, echt heel.
Ja, dat is mooi.
Ik ga haar wel interviewen voor mijn project. Zal ik even een rondleiding geven alvast over dit? En wij gaan zeker wel een presentatie.
Ja. Ja, zeg maar wat jullie het beste uitkomt.
Ja, ja. Yeah, exactly. I thought so. When I saw your hands, it's always. And you're always in the wrong moment.
Yeah, of course.
Huh?
I didn't put it back.
No?
No, I didn't.
Oh no!
But it's a nice sentence.
Nobody that stopped to help?
No.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes you're lucky and you're the expert. Oh, okay. No, it's not.
I'm supposed to be taking photographs. I'm supposed to be taking photographs.
Okay. Sure. That's fun.
Of what?
Of what?
What is going to be the study?
So I think that, so the idea is that people would wave, use the thing.
Oh.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly.
Closer though too. I don't know, I find it a bit cold.
Yeah.
For me it's always cold.
Okay. And then, so this is the part of Dara, so people should be waving this up. And then there is a presentation.
Yeah.
So during the presentation, I don't know, there is not much to. Yeah, that's it.
So Dora, what is the idea?
Yeah, so we don't have a lot of people, as you see. But anyway, at 6 o'clock we have to start the presentation. So Valeria will stand in the middle until we give the presentation. That is now live streaming, and there are people already watching.
Yeah.
So
Are they listening to?
So they're listening to it. So my idea is you can make some sort of movies and take a picture of this.
Movies or what? Of her speaking, of audio speaking.
Yeah, no, of Valeria speaking. I will be speaking shortly at the end of the presentation.
So I need to put the stative here.
Do you have a tripod?
Yes. So I can put it here.
Or you just put the camera here? I don't know.
Yeah, it's one here.
Because my tripod was already used. I do have a camera. If you want to use mine, it will be even easier.
Not for me.
I'm not for you.
Yeah. Okay, and what else?
So that's
Is someone going to do something with it?
yeah. So this is also part of the presentation.
But can I speak without my mask when I give?
When you stand here, you don't have to use the mask. But now,
Just double checking because.
yeah, because we are today.
Yeah. No, I agree on that, but I was just wondering because.
otherwise.
And you start at 6?
Yeah.
And you start
Now?
non-stop?
Yeah, and
As soon as.
when Valeria is done, and then I will just explain a little bit my part.
Do you explain before or after?
No, after.
After. I have 3 slides.
You have
On
to
the,
introduce me.
I have 3 slides. Well, what do you want me to say?
Yeah, well, about this collaboration.
No, the collaboration, yes.
And then
But if I need to
when
properly,
you're done, you can.
if I need to properly introduce to.
So.
Wat een mooie weefgetouw, hè?
Maar over het getouw. Ja, ik ga even wat vertellen.
Oh, werk je voor mij? Ja. Trouwens, dit is dus Ernie. Ja, sorry, ik wil nog geen handen geven, hè? Tussendoor.
Zo.
Ja.
Ik doe de hele dag trouwens.
Ja.
Nou, dit is het weefgetouw. Het is eigenlijk een soort van metafoor. Dan krijg je zo meteen even uitleg over wat. En hier worden dus wel veranderingen geweven. Er staat uit 4 verschillende punctjes. Dus die is groepsdynamiek, rit, zwarte. Ja, en dan zit er ook nog een deurtje. Hier zit er ook wel patroon. En dat wordt dan in de wind gegeven. Dit is gewoon dicht. Dat wil zeggen dus dat je deze niet omhoog kan doen. Maar aan de andere kant zie je wel staan in de ogen mogen. Kijk, deze kan er wel open. Dus ja, die moet je dus wel in het voelen welke ogen gaan en welke niet.
Is it too much, maybe?
I can move these, huh? Because I don't.
Nou, dat is straks goed. Ik doe het wel. Dat kunnen we doen. Wil je het doen?
Ja, je moet dus wel even heel erg omhoog gaan. Dus deze kan omhoog. Dus dan moet je echt vasthouden. Deze kan ook omhoog. Deze kan ook omhoog.
the day with more energy. No, oh. So do you do the photographer as a job or?
Yeah, job.
Yes. And what kind? Is like events like this or you do?
No, mainly food photography
Ah,
or
okay.
portraits.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you have your own studio where you do the food or you go
I go
based on
to
company?
places.
To
Yeah.
place?
I have my own lights or make sometimes a studio. Yeah, or I go to studios. Yeah.
And do you make all the preparation with the, or you just do
I
food?
also make, yeah, no, I don't cook, but sometimes I do the styling.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But that's been already my previous job. Now I try to do more different things. So I try to do more social projects or graphic design. Now I'm
No, the
looking at.
graphic design goes a bit in a slightly different. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. I get a bit tired of it, so I'm all over the place now. Yeah. And you?
I do research
For?
on neuroscience. So we study empathy.
Yeah.
Neuroscience is basically how the brain works and how it makes us being empathic. I mean, you will hear a lot of it tonight. So I'm not going to explain. And yeah, I've been doing that for a long time now. Yeah, but I have a passion for photography since I was a child. I always did photography. At one point, I was, I said, okay, now I quit science. I focus on the photography part.
Oh,
But then
you can combine them.
I could combine them, but I think so. The way I see photography, in a way, it's very similar to the way I do science. So then at that point, I thought, okay, I'm not sure whether changing would make such a difference because you work, with projects, idea, you develop it,
Exactly.
you have a lot of competition.
Yeah, too much.
Yeah, So it felt like, okay, if I switch, I'm going to end up doing basically the same as I'm doing now. So I thought, okay, let's stay. I like what I do, and now I don't have so much time to take pictures, but it's nice. I really love yeah. Also because I liked a lot to take pictures in social situations, and then you really play a role. The way you perceive the interaction is totally different, and I really liked it, but at one point I felt, okay, but then I'm never part of it.
Yeah, exactly. You're not.
You're not, because you're really in the observer and you catch the moment, and I said, okay, now I want to be part.
Though there are a lot of techniques now that you can be part of it, or you give the camera to people, and
True.
Now it's going all over the place.
Yeah, that is true. I've seen that part.
Especially for documentaries, a lot of people do that.
Yeah.
They encourage people to take photos with their phone, so it's like.
Yeah, that's more Yeah, you're right. It's more.
Yeah.
One day, who knows?
I know.
I have a long list of things.
Yeah, me too.
At one point, I also thought, okay, if science doesn't go right, I will do pasta.
Pasta.
Why not? Yeah, that's it.
You want to do your bicycle?
Do you want to do that? Do you want to get your hands dirty? No.
I can tell you what to do. That's good.
That's
much
a nice
better.
way, exactly.
Otherwise, you never learn. Otherwise, I have to do it again and again and again. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to.
I don't mind teaching, but I have.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Maybe you can bring your bike inside.
Yeah.
Because it's getting quite cold, I must say. She's just been operated.
Oh,
She's sterilized. She's now 2 years old.
yeah.
And
Well,
we are like, do we want to have babies or not? Like, and we decided not to. So right now she's still groggy and very calm. Normally she's running with all the kids and all them everywhere. Like, but 10 days of quarantine restrictions like us.
yeah. That's good. It's nice to have a dog.
Yeah, it's nice.
she just went to wash her hands. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Jo, ga een foto van je maken.
Mag ik een foto ervan maken?
Zeker, zeker. Ja, je wordt...
Ja, kan je.
Valeria, can you talk?
Yes, I can talk, but it's not on.
No, it is on.
It is on? Okay. Ah, yeah, because we don't have loudspeakers here.
Can you...
Speak? Yes, I can. Can you see me speaking? Can you hear me speaking? I will talk much louder later on. No? Speak? Yes, I do speak. So I do have some audience.
No, you have more audience on live.
Yes.
Live. So, yeah, we're going to turn on the lights actually. That's a very good question.
On or off? On. For you. We have competition for life. I want it off, you want it on.
Now only that part is on.
Sure. You just tell me when you want me to start, because then I go on.
Yeah, I'm going to...
But will they say to listen or?
No, they will see us. Zo, wij willen eigenlijk ook beginnen. Oh, dat is goed. So we would start the presentation.
Heb je ons licht uitstaat? Dat je niet in de streaming ineens aan. Hoe wil je dat we zitten? Hier. Where you want. Yeah. So I will be walking around. I can go as far as here.
Yes.
Okay. And I will present everything there. So it's just the first minute that I need to press, but otherwise I will come here.
I can do that for you.
Yeah, but it's only for 1 minute and a half, so it's okay. Okay, so welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk to you and tell you about my work and the work that we have done together with Theodora. And as I'm a passionate skater, I'm going to start with a short video to put you in the mood. Let's see. Well. Hopla. Aha. There was a bit, yes. Okay, let me start and I come to you to discuss it. Just 1 second. Sorry. I don't know why it doesn't show. Oh, I can leave it here. So, while watching that movie, okay, some of you might not have never skated in their life, and some maybe did. So, and your experience of this movie might vary at the beginning. At the start, maybe some of you mainly watched and enjoyed the static, and some that experienced skating before or did some other sport might have also perceived some of the movements,
they stretched, and when he was going down, he was trying to keep the equilibrium with the weight of hair. And even if you have a child, you can kind of remember how it feels to lift a child. And so this perception might vary across you, but I'm sure that the moment she felt, you all, or most of you, felt the fall, felt the pain in your hip and how painful it feels. So, and now if I give you another example, like let's say you are, sorry, there is something that doesn't really go, and if does not work, and I don't know why, you need to be sorry about that. Just that we was probably online for too long, and then the disk went to sleep. Okay, and we started again. You see. Okay, now it works. Okay, now I want you to think of a second example. Try to think of a moment in your life in which maybe your friend cheated on you or really did something that upset you, or maybe when you were a teenager and your parents told you not to do something you really wanted to do. I'm sure that in that moment as well, you probably felt this urge to maybe kick the other person. But I'm also sure that many of you did not end up kicking the other person. And why? So there are many processes that could define the why or give you a reason not to hit somebody else. You can be in the dilemma, hit or not to hit, and think about it, okay? Some moral decision, or maybe simply because your mom taught you that it's not a good idea to solve your problems with violence. But I'm kind of, we are also have this feeling that we know that it's not nice to hurt other people. And indeed, you see, there is this nice sentence above my presentation that says, do not do to others what would cause pain if done to you. So it's very intuitive, right, that you basically don't hurt others because you know that it will hurt and you would not like to be hurt as well. So I'm a neuroscientist, and I and the people working in my lab are interested in understanding what is happening when, for instance, you watch the skating video or when you are in a situation like this one in the brain. I think, that's also not nice. Voila. Yeah, exactly. And so exactly. So what is the brain doing? How the brain participates in our perception and in the understanding of what are the consequences of my action. So in the old days, like about 25 years ago, so not that many years ago actually, people and scientists had a bit the idea of a sandwich, like the mind would work like a sandwich in which the top bread that you see here is a little bit, is the visual system. So basically the part of the brain that would allow us to see and to perceive what's going on in the environment. And then you would have the juicy part that is the reasoning, what I was also mentioning maybe at the beginning of this slide, right? The fact that you think, that you know, that it's not good to hurt, and all the nice reasoning you can do in these circumstances. And then you have the other boring part at the bottom of your sandwich, of your hamburger, that is the motor system. And the motor system is what at the end allows you to act upon the environment. And this was a bit of what we would now consider a bit of an old-fashioned way of seeing the things. And now, there was an important discovery about, let's say, this 20 years ago, that basically allowed us now to have a bit of a different idea of how we perceive and interact with the world around us. And this is also what we're going to call embodiment. So this discovery was done in Italy in the city of Parma in the laboratory of Giacomo Rizzolatti. And at that time, they were basically working with macaques. And they were working with trying to understand what is the role of our motor system. They were trying to discover all the properties of what this part of the brain was up to. And the motor system, as I mentioned before, is this part of the brain that allows you to move and that helps you to program the actions that you're gonna do. And the experiments that they were performing at that time was simply by recording the activity of the brain of the macaque while the macaque was performing an action, like grasping. So very simple one. And what they discovered, and it was a bit of an accidental discovery, is that the same cells in that particular motor region that they were active when the monkey was performing the action itself were also activated by when the monkey would see the experimenter doing the similar action. And what you see down in the graph, I mean, it's mainly, you see an increase in green when the cells start discharging. So you have here you see, just let's see, here you see the line when the action starts, and you see that the cells increase the response. And the same things for the same cells when the macaque sees the experimenter. Why was this important? This was important because it was challenging the theory I was explaining you before, the hamburger theory. Because now we have cells in our motor system that do not only operate or are not only active when we act, right? But they become also active when we see somebody acting. So basically, we start using our own motor system to quickly have an understanding of what the others are doing. So we don't have any more visual and then thinking and then motor. Now what we have is the motor becomes part of the perception. So when I see you grasping a glass, or I see my friend grasping a glass, I don't just see my friend grasping the glass. I kind of activate the part of the brain that makes me normally grasping a glass. And this part of the brain is also associated often with the reasons why I'm doing that action. So in most of the cases, I'm grasping an empty glass to drink because I'm thirsty and I'm gonna fill that glass. So now I see you grasping the glass and immediately I can immediately think of, oh, maybe she's thirsty, and then I can act and try to fill the glass with some water. Okay, and the experiment that I've shown you before was, so the main discovery was done in macaques. But of course, many of us are interested in ourselves, in the human beings, right? And so in humans, it's a bit more difficult to record cell activity for obvious reasons. So what we can do, though, is to have an indirect measure of activation. So not directly measuring the activity of all the cells, but we can have an overview of the activity of the brain in a particular moment when you're performing a particular task. So people would come, so you, for instance, instead of coming to the exhibit today, you could have come in the lab, and I could have asked you to perform a few actions in the MRI scanner. So the MRI scanner, if you're not familiar with the technique, is basically using a magnetic field, is generating a magnetic field that can basically, that allows the indirect measurement of changes in the blood, the level of oxygenation in the blood. So when a cell is active, you need oxygen. So the cell is sending messages to the bloodstream, oh, I need oxygen. So the bloodstream brings the oxygen, and basically every time it's active, you have an increase, and then the cell is not active anymore, you have a decrease, and so far, so forth. And we are able, through the magnetic field, to record these changes. So here, you see a brain, and in red, I show the part of the brain that are activated when you perform an action. And in this case, there were people, I don't know, taking using the spoon as if they were eating some soup or kind of drinking from a glass. And now what I can do, I can show you videos like this of somebody else grasping a glass or somebody else scooping the soup. And then I can map on the brain the parts that are activated when you see somebody else. So now what you see here is in red, the areas that are active when you perform an action. In blue, the areas that are active when you see somebody else performing an action. And I can look for an overlap, which you see here in white, and which represents the part of the brain that are activated both while you perform and you see an action. So basically, also in humans, we see that we use our own motor system, for instance, when we perceive or we are witnessing the actions of other people. And this is also a nice analogy with the work done in the macaque brain, because the regions that we observe in humans are the same, basically, in which they've recorded these mirror neurons in the macaque brain to start with. So while with the fMRI we cannot record the single cell activity, we can kind of record an average signal from the area, which resembles what they found in the macaques. Okay, now what the fact that we see, these regions being activated when we do something and when we observe somebody else, it does not necessarily mean that they help us to perceive the action of other people. Because I want to make you understand the reason why, I will show you this example of the car. So when you go on the highway and a car brakes in front of you, you have the lights that light up, right? So you cannot, so if by the observation that every time that you see the light turning on the car brake, you cannot conclude what is the cause and what is the consequence. So you cannot conclude, for instance, that the light is what it makes the car stopping. Although you could conclude that, right? If you just see the light every time that the car stops, turns up, you can say, oh, it's the light that makes the car stop. But we know it's not true. So how can we test that whether the light is what makes the car stop or not? One easy way would be just to break these lights, right? If we break the light, then we can see whether the cars can still stop or not. So this is the idea of perturbing something to evaluate how much is necessary for a particular thing to happen is one way that we also use. So one way to test whether the activity that you see here, it is necessary to perceive, for instance, the actions of the other people, is by trying to manipulate this activity and see, okay, now if I have a technique that allows me to temporarily and for a few minutes or so, alter the norm, change out the state, and then if we observe a change in the behavior, then we can conclude that yes, the activity of this area was necessary for that behavior. So what we do normally, we just, as I said before, we invite people in the lab. And this time, we made them watch these videos that you just saw of somebody lifting an object. And the task that you have to perform is to tell me which of the object was the heaviest one. Now, I need a tool to perturb the activity of this region. And this tool is called transcranial magnetic stimulation. And again, it uses a magnetic field, but this time is smaller and much more local as well. It's focused, you can focus this magnetic field in a particular place. And this magnetic field basically is going to perturb temporarily, right, to change the activity in that region. And now, while I'm doing that, I ask you to do the task again. So if now the performance in the task goes down, so what you see in the graph, you see I just marked the performance of my participants, and then I compare the performance while I'm faking the stimulation and while I'm doing a real stimulation. And then you see that the performance while I'm stimulating, it goes down, suggesting that the area that I perturbed is involved and helps me to perceive the weight of that object. And this experiment shows again the fact that our motor system is important to perceive the actions of other people. In this case, was specifically that it helps you to perceive the weight of an object when it's lifted by somebody else, but you can come up with slightly different tasks. And another way to study the necessity or the causal role of a particular region into a behavior is by using patients, for instance. There are patients that have damage in the brain due to a stroke or an accident or a disease. In this case, were people that had a cerebellar disease, and you can ask them if they want to participate in the experiment. And when you, so we were in a collaboration with, actually with Rotterdam, and a colleague of ours, Chris Teseo. And basically, we were able to test patients, as I was mentioning, with a disease in the cerebellum, which is the small brain, is called in Dutch. And this region was also actively, we observed this region also when we observe other people's actions. So it was also present together with the motor system, because it is part of the motor system. So we wanted to check there as well whether this region was necessary to perceive the actions of others. So if you see, we first asked the patients and the control group to lift cans. And again, we asked them to judge the weight of these cans. And basically, patients were performing worse than the controls, already suggesting that the cerebellum is necessary for you, for yourself, to judge the weight of an object. So if this region also helps you to perceive the actions of the other people, you would expect now that when you ask them to watch somebody else lifting the can, as in the task before, they would also have a lower performance in the observation, which was indeed the case. And interestingly, they got worse. So patients that they were further in the disease, so they had a much bigger spread of the disease, they were worse than patients that were at the beginning of the disease. Again, suggesting that the cerebellum, or how well the cerebellum function is important for understanding the actions of other people. But of course, the examples that I showed you at the beginning is not just about action, right? Falling as well, it's also about sensation. So what is happening in the domain of sensation? I can anticipate you that it's kind of similar to what we've seen for action. So we had this very high-tech experiment. You can see somebody brushing the leg of somebody else. Yes? Well, science is a bit improvisation once in a while. And by doing so, as you can anticipate, I can map in the brain the areas that are active when I touch you. Or when somebody touches your leg, let's say. Yeah, exactly. But here they know. Here it's not a surprise. They know that they will be touched. I mean, we did also another interesting experiment where we actually told the participants that it was either a man or a woman to touch them, and then you also have a very different reaction in the brain. But that's another story. But so here we wanted to map what the brain regions that are active when you are touched. And then, again, in a similar idea, we wanted to check what is happening when you, oh, the drive goes also, when you see somebody else get touched. And again, and then let's see, the presentation stopped. I'm so sorry. It's just that I'm too slow, probably, myself, and then my hard drive starts to sleep, and then, whoops, everything is gone. I should have copied everything. Okay. Okay, here we are. Okay, so in blue is the part of the brain that is active when you see somebody being touched. And as you can easily see, is that the overlap is big, and the white represents the part of the brain which are activated both when you are touched and when you see somebody else being touched. And this is a part of the brain that is called the somatosensory cortex, which indeed, as the term indicates, it normally takes care of your the sensations that you have on your body. And what about emotions? Because again, it's not just about action, it's not just about sensation, it's a combination of all these things, especially when you see complex videos or when you navigate in the world in your everyday life. So here, this time, we ask people to come in, and we have another high-tech design experiment. I mean, this was really a high-tech, because we had an anesthesia mask while in the scanner, and then we synchronized some odorants with your respiration in a way that every time you would inhale, you would either receive a disgusting odorant, like rotten eggs, or something pleasant like mint. And at that point, I was one of the participants, and I can tell you it was not necessarily pleasant all the time. So, when we present the disgusting odorants, here we can map basically the region that make me disgust. Disgust, I say, okay, this is a region that is called the anterior insula, and it's normally taking care of my proprioception, interoception and the feelings, and so forth. And then here is basically, we would again show you somebody else getting a disgusted odorant. And then again, what you will see is that there is a part of the insula that becomes activated both when you are disgusted and when you see somebody else being disgusted by what it's smelling. And now I'm copying the presentation on my computer because I'm a bit tired that it stops every time the disk falls asleep. Okay, just a second. Okay, now it will not happen anymore. Opera. So you see now the face, the disgusted face. And then again, you would not drink from that cup, wouldn't you? No, eh? Yeah, exactly. I agree. So the same region of the brain is also active when you read in your book a sentence like this. when you turn around to look who's leaning on your shoulder, you are peering into the unsightly face of a homeless guy. The guy leans forward and discharges the complete content of his inflamed stomach on you. You are covered with decaying vomit that was formed by rotten meat picked out of the garbage cans across the street, and so far and so forth. So now your insula is lighting up, I can tell you. And also your insula is activated when you see people smiling at you, and when you see somebody in pain, or when you see somebody sad. So it really seems to be a region of the brain that is active when you feel emotions and when you see somebody else going through the similar emotions. And here again, there is a study from patients. So here there were patients with a lesion in this area of the brain. And when that occurs, if I were to propose a nice chocolate cake to this person or a rotten one, basically this person would not be able to choose. He would just go for the first that is in front of him. So it could be the rotten one or the other one. It would not make any difference. And this person would also be worse in recognizing facial expressions of disgust. Again, suggesting that that part of the brain is kind of important for you to perceive, in this case, disgust. So if I go back to the first example, now we know that there are parts of the brains that are active when we act, right? When we are hurt and when we are hit ourselves, that would become activated already in the expectation of what my action will cause to my friend if I decide to hurt this person. I know that if I hurt this person will feel bad physically, emotionally, and everything that comes along. I really embody basically what he is going to feel. And what I've showed you as well is that if I perturb the activity in these regions, I basically am not so good at perceiving what's going on in the others anymore. So now I want you to think of when you hurt yourself. Yeah? If you cut yourself, what do? You just try to remove the cause of your pain, right? If you hammer yourself, you're going to be careful not to hammer you anymore. If there is a piece of glass, you want to remove it. So the fact that you feel pain serves you or gives you the motivation to get rid of the cause of your pain. So we were thinking, okay, if this bunch of regions is necessary for me to perceive how you feel, for instance, if it's necessary to feel that you are hurt if I see you cutting, would this also motivate me to go and help you? Because when I see you, that you cut your finger, I know how you feel, or I feel what you feel, and maybe this gives me the motivation to come and help you out. How do we bring this to the lab? I mean, of course, our dream is to really understand how the brains really help us to navigate the environment, which is very complex. But we need to start somewhere. So we normally have to think of simpler examples when we study the brain activity in the lab. So we ask participants to come in pairs, basically. One of them will receive a small shock on the hand. A small shock, like electroshock, like when you put the fingers in the current. Not so strong, just a little sensation on your skin. But not pleasant, of course, otherwise. And then what you see is the reaction of this person. And okay, and then I give you money. So the other participant, let's say you two come together, and she's gonna receive the shock, and you're gonna receive money. And now I tell you, okay, you have €6. You can decide. You see, first I'm gonna give her the shock, the little shock, and now you can decide whether you want to keep these €6 for yourself, or whether to want to give up some of these euros to reduce the intensity of the shock. This is up to you. Okay, so if you don't perceive any pain, you would be probably tempted to keep the money, right? And then what you will see is like a video of the other person receiving the next shock and a reaction. If you, on the other side, perceived a lot of pain in the first instance, and you decide to donate 5 euros, then the intensity of the next shock will be much lower. So basically, no more pain. Exactly, exactly. Money versus pain. Exactly. So now what you see is that there is a relationship between the amount of pain that you see in the first instance and the amount of money that you're willing to give up for. So more pain you see, more money you give up, right? Quite straightforward. And now we have similar stimuli where we, instead of giving the shock, we just slap with a belt. Okay. And we want to see whether the regions that are normally involved in me feeling pain are again important during your decision of whether to donate money or not, whether to help the other or not. So again, we use this transcranial magnetic stimulation that I used before to perturb the region of the brain while you see the other person receiving the shock. And what I see, if I now record your behavior, how much money you donate, you see that the relationship that it was so nice before, now it becomes flatter, meaning that the people cannot anymore very well associate the pain and the money. They start to donate a bit more randomly than they did before. And on the other hand, if I now change the task a little bit, and instead of asking you to donate money, I ask you to tell me how much pain you perceive. Okay. And now I can use a technique similar to the one before to excite, to activate the same region of the brain. And what I see there is that if I, instead of inhibiting or perturb the activity, I activate that region, you perceive more pain than it was actually there. If I put these results together, they suggest that the activity of that particular brain region, which was the somatosensory cortex that makes you normally feel the pain on your skin, is important for you to decide how much money you want to donate. And it does so because it is also important to perceive how much pain you see. And then if I perturb your perception, your donation will also change accordingly. So the idea here is that, you are, let's say, you see the person on the top right corner, right? So you see how the other person feels. We activate this embodied kind of reaction on the brain. This activation allows me to bring the pain of another person, which normally, how can I know otherwise how you feel? I just know it because I activate regions that make me feel pain, and basically they allow me to give a value to the pain of the other. And this value, of course, will also depend by my experience with pain, so it will change. And by changing the value, and by giving me the opportunity to attribute a value to the other, I now can make any decision. I can compare, the value of money that I know, because every time I get money, I know how I feel, if I'm happy or not. And now I know I can attribute a value to your pain, and I can compare and make my decision. And then I can decide whether to act helping the other or not. So what is happening here? I find it an interesting case, right? Because I know that these activations are there in the majority of us. And but in this case, let's say what is at stake, the pain. Yeah, it's again, pain versus money, but much more than in my experiment. In my experiment, we are speaking of 10 cents versus a mild shock. Here, more money. Exactly. What is happening to these areas? Are we shutting them off like a switcher of the light? Or it's just that people are there are people that are totally insensitive, or that some people don't have activity at all. Right? So it's a bit this question whether can we regulate it, or it's so automatic that some people have it and some people don't. So we, let me see. Are you, so how do you feel in terms of time and attention, interest? Okay.
What does it mean with the money?
Mm-hmm.
When you see it, when you see someone's having pain, you give more.
Yeah.
And when you don't see it,
yeah. So
only hear it.
No. Okay. We play like we are in a situation where we play continuously, right? So now I see you in pain, and I can decide that how much pain I want you to feel the next time. So if I donate money, you're gonna feel better because I will not give you any shock. If I don't give money, you will be in pain again. So that means that you can decide, basically, how much do you care, basically, about the pain of the other. It is in your. So if you really are in need of this money, for instance, that's another consideration. You probably say, okay, I see sufferance, but it's okay, she will survive, okay? Or because you are in the experiment, maybe you don't need this money, and you say, oh, okay, I want to help. Or maybe you suffer a lot, because there are many variables that play. And what I wanted to show is that there are a lot of things like cognitive thinking, like or the need of, you really need the money to eat, or this kind of needs. But there is also a part of your brain that is really able to perceive, that helps you to perceive what the other feels. And because you have that part of the brain, you can then say, okay, you can evaluate how much pain you see, and then take a decision, okay, I'm going to discard this pain, or I'm going to take this pain in consideration. But first you need to be able to perceive and to evaluate how much pain the other is in. And so I will go to this slide then. Okay. Voilà. So we were interested at that point to understand indeed whether there were cases for which people basically cannot perceive the pain of the others. So we were wondering, if you're a professional boxer, what are you doing? Maybe these people is a selection of a natural selection in which the people that perceive less are more tempted to take those professions, and people that are more sensitive avoid these professions, right? That could be one interpretation. So we thought about psychopathy, because psychopaths are kind of known to lack empathy. So we wondered, okay, are these regions, the embodiment regions, not active in this population, for instance, and that's why they cannot perceive maybe the sufferance of the other, and therefore are free to act, they feel free to act violently or not. So we collaborated with the Mestal Clinic in Groningen, and they had psychopathic individuals in the clinic, and they committed crime. And we asked them to come to the scanner. So it was quite of an interesting experiment, because they came, of course, with some guards, and it was nice. And we made them observe other people's receiving, let's say, receiving pain, like twisting the finger, or feeling socially excluded, which is also another form of pain, right? You feel left out, you don't want to feel left out. And then they observed neutral interaction, like, yeah, what's going on? And then some pleasant one. Yeah, exactly. And then we make them feel the same. So we slap their hand, we push them away when they were instructed to look for the hand of the experimenter, we shake their hand, and we caress their hand. And then what we did the usual trick. They were in the MRI scanner, so we could map the region of the brain that were activated by you being pushed away or being in pain, and when you see somebody else in the same situation, in a control group and in the psychopath. So what you see on the left side, all these regions that you see there are the same that we came across during the presentation. So we have motor regions because there are actions there are sensory region because the hands touch each other, and there are emotional regions because of course you have all the emotions. And when we map the same in the psychopathic individual, we see that they have a reduction in the activity in these regions. Yeah, that was our first interpretation. So at first we thought, oh, you see that indeed our hypothesis was correct. They probably, they don't have so much of this activity, so they don't feel anything that stops them to hurt others. At the same time, you hear a lot of nice stories about these people. I mean, I also had a very good experience with them. And then you see like, oh, my neighbors, they were surprised. Oh, he was such a nice guy. So how can it be that you can be perceived as so nice if you're totally insensitive to the emotions of others? You must still have being able to show empathy, because otherwise people would tell that you're weird or that you're not empathic. So what we did, we manipulated the task. So we showed them the same movies as before, but this time we asked them, okay, now when you watch the movies, you really try to put yourself in the place of the hand that is in front of you, the receiving hand, the one that receives the pain or the caress. So really try to put yourself there and to empathize with this hand. And when we ask them to do this, you see an empty brain. This brain is a difference between the activity of the control and the psychopathic. So that suggests that the moment in which you ask them to empathize, there is no difference anymore in their activity. They activate their brain equally, the same way as the control group. And this is quite important because it changes the idea in the sense that we cannot say anymore that they cannot empathize, that are not able to, right? But it means that they might not do it spontaneously, right? Not as much as the control group, but if they have a motivation or they ask to, then they can. And this changes a lot the way you have to think in terms of what you want to do with this group of people, because if you start from the assumptions that they cannot perceive anything, is different than saying, well, they can, but they might not be interested in. So then if I need to focus my attention, or maybe to make the pain of the other relevant to them in order that they can really become active and avoid hurting the other. And here I have, one slide, before this. These are the last two slides before the project, and then I'm done. And what I want to show here is that these regions, the one I've showed you so far, can really be up and down regulated by you, consciously and unconsciously. So if I ask you now to watch a particular movie, empathizing or being detached because you want to analyze what you see, right, you will have a variation in the amount of activity of these brain regions. So if I ask you to empathize, you will have more activity, and importantly, your brain will be much more synchronized to the brain of your partner or of another person that is watching the movie at the same time. And if I ask you to detach, the synchronization across individuals decreases. Okay? So this is quite important because it tells you that we are flexible and we can also act upon these processes. And we can also learn. Basically, this these activities can be learned over time. And here I have just a simple case with the actions again. So if you never played the piano or any instrument before, and I make you listen to this song, right? The people that never played any instrument, they will only activate the region of the brain that is processing the auditory signal. So just the auditory cortex. But after 5 hours training, if I now teach you how to play these notes, let's see whether it stops. Then, when I make you listen to the song again, exactly, you also activate your motor system. So now you made a connection between your auditory cortex and your motor system. And now you basically feel, when you listen to a song, you feel the movement in your fingers as well. Okay, I would like just to give you a nice conclusion of this part. And as I said, when we observe people around us, okay, we perceive as if ours their actions, sensations, and emotions. Yeah, and they help to adapt, to change our behavior accordingly, based on how we feel and the circumstances. And there are both individual and situational manipulation. It's a balance, okay? And I also want to point out that the thinking, all this processing that I mentioned at the beginning of the slides, that the thinking, the cognition, they also exist. And they interact with this more embodied system, right? And by interacting, you can really become super flexible and adaptable to the environment, but it also makes you responsible of your choices. Exactly. And now here I have the last 2 slides in which I want to introduce you and explain a little bit the project that I made together with Theodora. That was an interesting adventure that started quite some time ago, but was very stimulating and fun, I would say. And here, try to imagine, walking on the street. And if you are the person that is looking at the phone, you see on the right, there is somebody looking at the phone. Exactly, right? So the attention is towards the phone. And now if there is a tree in front, this person would come and there. But now you are one of the other person, maybe let's say the one with the dog over there, and you are just walking around. Our question was a little bit, okay, how the mindset that you are in, or your personality, or how much empathic you are, or how much sensitive you are to what is going on around you, will influence the distance at which you will, walk, you will pass by the other individual. So we ask people to come in the studio. We did it in a couple of locations, and we asked them to walk around freely. And then we gave some instructions. And some instructions were like walk freely around the room, or trying to perceive the texture of the other people's clothes, or trying to perceive the movements of the other, or trying to perceive how the other people feel, or how you feel. And we wanted to understand basically whether these different instructions affect how close you will be towards the other individual, but unconsciously, right? How it affects the way you move across people. And what you see, which is a bit what we expected as well, is that when you walk around the space thinking about yourself, you will walk in average much further away to the other. So on the axis there you see the average distance. So you will walk much further away from the others. Exactly. When I ask you to concentrate towards the others, like how they feel, or their clothes, or even how they move, then this distance is smaller. So you will be also walking closer. And maybe if you're in a very good mood as well, and you're outside and it's sunny, you're going to end up talking to that person. And in the other case, if you're really thinking about yourself, you would just go and ignore everyone else. And I was also a bit, I thought it was interesting to see that when I ask you to walk freely, so without instructions, or to look at the space, the amount of movement is a little bit in between. So as if there is a bit of combination of everything. And yeah, and then here is also what a way we can analyze the data is to plot the movements on the floor. And then you see here, for instance, that again, that there is less blue spread around in the self compared to the other conditions. And these maps are one of the starting point also of the work of Dora. And yeah, you see? So you see that every dot, so what you see is basically where people were on the floor at every particular time point for the different conditions. And yeah, so I let you talk. And yes, and while you are preparing yourself, I also want to, I have a thanks slide. I would like to thank, first of all the people that came to the experiment, because that was also a nice adventure. And I need to thank my partner in crime, like partner in the scientific and in the private life too, Christian Kiezers, with whom I lead the lab, which is the Social Brain Lab at the Netherlands Institute for Neuroscience. People like Giacomo Rizzolatti and Vittorio Gallese, who were basically the people that inspired all our scientific career. All the people throughout the years that helped with all these nice experiments, and they're not even all here, so a lot. And I also have to thank my little girls, because they've been very, you know, when you come back home or something goes wrong, and they are there for you with a smile, it makes your life so much nicer. And every difficulty seems nothing in comparison. And if you want to read more, there is also a book that you can find around. And now, I will leave this slide, okay, but I want to give the floor to Dora. Get overwhelmed, and you know, and then they don't help anymore. In every, I mean, that's life, eh? It's a balance. Or also, if you become a doctor as a profession, you are exposed to, you know, people feeling bad all the time. So you need to be able to regulate. So you need to stay empathic for the patients and the family, but at the same time you need to shut off yourself. You don't live anymore. No. Sorry.
So thank you also very much for coming here. So I'm Theodora, I'm an artist and I work in public spaces. I do engaging projects, and I have to sit somehow here. No, here is okay. So I started to get. So I started to get interested in empathy many years ago when I was reading a lot about flocking behavior. I thought the flocks, they must have a mechanism that makes them stay together, and some kind of surviving mechanism. And I thought empathy should be involved in this, and I wanted to know more about it. So I discovered this book many years ago, and I started to read. And one of the things that I came across and I found quite fascinating was the fact that there is an empathic mechanism that makes you that's activated every time you learn something new. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting. So I contacted Valeria many years ago, and I said to her that I really would like to investigate more about empathy and what is the role in human interactions. And Valeria was really interesting, as it is her research. This is her research that's been doing for 20 years now. So we started to think about alternative ways to set up an art and science collaboration, which is not an easy thing to do, as we are both from different backgrounds. So we thought of setting up an experiment where we could research the interactions among people and the role of empathy in that. And I basically offered myself to set up an art project that translates the scientific data, the scientific results, into an artwork. And so we started a year ago. We basically developed the idea, and Valeria was working on the experiment, and then Corona came. And so we basically went through a lot to set it up, and we managed to find ways, and we had the protocols getting accepted, and then all of a sudden Corona came, and we all thought, hey, but wait a minute, this is an interesting situation that we actually use to implement an experiment that tells something about it. And so we made some adjustments in the experiment, and we basically started a series of experiments here in Charlois, in Rotterdam. We did also some experiments in Amsterdam. And so the engineer developed a software that translated all the data that we got from the experiments, the series experiments that we did. So what I actually did is I tried to find a way to made that translation of all the interactions that we were researching between the dynamics into an artwork. So I came up with the idea of setting up a Loom project, and so you see that there is a Collective Loom. The idea came from the fact that I started to realize that there are so many factors and so many things that are influencing interactions, human interactions, that we actually have constantly interfering in each other processes without being aware of it. And so the Collective Loom serves as a metaphor for that. I got a lot of data, and so these I used to produce the rags, the weaving rags that I'm going to use for the loom. And so what you see here is two hanging rags that represent the data that I got from the movement. Inside, the loom is actually built in a way that the functions of the loom are separated. So you have people that are using the shafts. There is a pedal on the back that controls that system that where patterns are registered. On the front, there is I don't remember that word in English actually. Anyway, that thing that waves my rag. So so you need to collaborate with all these different people in order to be able to produce that work, to actually have that loom weaving, and to actually produce, to come to a final result. It's an artistic interpretation of that research that we've been done, and so now we are investigating on a new collaboration, actually on a following up based on the research that we are doing, and we still keep on collecting information for this project that hopefully lead to some conclusion, because at this moment we are we can't make any conclusions from the experiment, as we think that we need to understand the interactions within the different dynamics before we can make any final conclusions. So this is an ongoing research. So I would like to thank you very much for coming, and yeah, and I would like to thank a few people also, as Valeria already did. So this is a very, very long research, and in this research, Valeria has been a leading person, but we also had the help of a few other people, and one of them that's mentioned also in the movie is your software engineer and very good friend, Camilo, and the rest of the name? Rojas, yeah. In analyzing the data, the scientific data we got. We of course got the help of the assistants of Valeria, that's Celia Gavanosi, and there was the other one? Maybe yeah, we started this with Selena, yeah. And at the end, I would like to thank very much Stichting Bad that hosts us and helps us and support us with in this process, and Charlois Speciaal Festival, that was our funder and also supporter in this process. So thank you very, very much for being here.
Hello. You hear me? I have one question. I will know you do this together. I will know what idea was first. Was the book first, or was empathie first? Was the machine first? What was first in this together process? What?
It's hard to say, in the sense that from the moment that we met, that she came to me, I mean, this work was done, as part of my research, but the work we did together, the moment when she approached, it was really a dynamic develop, right? We kept talking and chit-chatting, and as she mentioned, there was another student involved at the beginning, this Selena, and we were like the three of us, and chit-chatting about empathy, about our daily life experience, and asking, okay, what do we really want to know, and conscious and unconscious processes, And then we were interested in cultural differences, in inter-individual differences, we are interested in many aspects that participate in empathy. So it's very hard to say what is the cause and the consequence. It was a very dynamic interaction that lasted for many years, I would say, before it really took form.
So if I may add something to it, the reason why I contacted Valeria is because I believe that empathy can be a very important tool in policy making, but also in the way we approach each other. So, so Valeria has a very broad knowledge in empathy. As we already heard, empathy is not a very simple thing. It's not as straightforward as we understand it from our simple approach. Like scientifically speaking, is a much broader understanding. And so we started to have this conversation, as it is a way of it was an exchange of ideas, and the way I see things influences very much the way I think. And I suppose that I tried to give you some insights from my perspective, my point of view, and that created created a bridge that brought us to this, actually.
And if I go back in my memory as well, before ending into the waving project, remember we had several different she had different ideas, like how to generate sounds, or we were thinking of colors, or we have been thinking of others, many different way to express our conversation, basically. And so it was a...
and I think these are all sub things, sub elements that are that will be implemented in the future as we actually are going to go on with this research. Any other questions? No.
It's the project is super good for she and for another people, because she asks who your hers quickly and the reaction, emotion. This four important thing: emotion, reaction, and action.
Yeah, I think that's a very good conclusion, right?
And it's not clear at all. And now we together to make and then to feel it, how it works, and how the impact you do. Yeah, well, it's so something you can do, feel, see. Yeah. And then with all this background, thank you very much. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, for she, this machine, for she is very important, because she's concentration, feeling, and emotion.
Would practice this every day.
Almost cannot anymore differentiate
The other. You really reach this level of synchrony, and I have a colleague.
It's fantastic to see how
So when you dance together, right at the beginning, thing and yeah.
I should have said that indeed was that this loom represents complexity. So in order to you need to and feel. So I think we should, yeah.
button.
Die banden, ja, die banden, ja. Die lange, die weefsels, ja.
Heb je die ook opgemaakt?
Die heb ik allemaal van.
Wat is het dat zijn op data?
Ja, dat zijn de weefgetouw die Valeria's laten zien. Die blauwe data. Dat zijn eigenlijk afbeeldingen van de omzet van nummers naar beweging. En die heb ik gebruikt om deze te maken. En ze zijn iedere draad heeft gewoon een apart gewerkt. Ik zit met speciale plakken, banden.
Maar nu door dit, zie je deze pink. Ja, ze moeten nog aanwijzen.
Well, thank you very much.
No, this is super amazing. I want to be there when we have more people, when we need to record more. But yeah, also from top. No, but I cannot. I thought actually always said so. I remember you were saying that already before, and I agree that we should do it.
We see how it is developed. Now we have the material, we can send it to people, and then people will react. And
All the cards.